All right, so 2015 Subaru Forester. I found some videos online, but everybody seems to think that this is really difficult. Maybe they're taking it to the dealership. I wanted to show you that you do not have to take your Subaru to the dealership to replace your lower ball joints or your drag arm bushings. They gave me a quote when they did an inspection on the vehicle. It said $700 to replace this lower drag arm or lower support bushing, and I did the first side already. It really wasn't that difficult at all, so I wanted to show you. You take out your wheel. I'm actually doing some other stuff, so I went ahead and took out my transaxle. 2 bolts here, sway bar bolt here. This support right here has 2 bolts in it. I did have to heat this up just a little bit on the other side to get this to pop out. We're in the south. It really wasn't that rusted, but it was pretty tight. There's a small crack right there. I used an air hammer and a chisel. There's the air hammer and the chisel. And I just drive it in right there, and it separated that a little bit, but it didn't separate it enough. It was still pretty corroded in there, so it was a little snug. I used a little bit of heat, and it just came right out with a hammer. Just hammer this a couple of times, and it came out. Now, once you get that apart, again, this bolt and this bolt on this support right here, and then there's some 19mm bolts and 1 nut right here. Very simple to take apart. One through bolt right here. Let me show you the other side to try to make this timely. So this all removed on this side. There's a little torch that I used. I have a cutting torch, but this was enough heat. Just this little torch here was enough heat. Everything disassembled. This is the new bushing installed. Now, this does need to be oriented correctly. If you notice, I got it aimed in a straight line to where the lower ball joint was, straight across. What I did was I marked where the other one was, and then I just centered to the marks that I had made and pressed it in. Let me show you how I pressed it in. You don't have to have a press. I happen to have a Harbor Freight press. You could do it with just a hammer or even a vise. If you just have like a large vise on a table, that would be good enough. I made this. It's just steel pipe I had around that was almost the right size. I ground it down just a hair to make it the right size. And then when I was pressing it back in, I didn't want it to cut into the rubber, so I put that one little lap around it just to make it wider. Again, press it out. You want it just big enough that it will press the bushing out and slip through. And then I didn't want to take a chance of cutting the rubber, so I made the end just a little bit wider when I was pressing it back in. That way it would press down and stop when it got when it pressed up against the steel seat. This took me, again, I want to say, even with making this piece, it took me an hour. And that was with making this. So the other side, now that this is made, maybe 30-40 minutes. That's with applying the heat to get it apart and everything. The Subaru dealership quoted me $700 and change just for this bushing. And they said it was worn. I didn't feel any issues on the front, but this is the old one. You can see that it's got a few tiny little cracks in it. They were saying that it was ready to replace. I'm not really sure that it was, but nevertheless, it was recommended, so I'm doing it. And definitely not worth $700, what they had quoted. Just, I don't know about y'all, but money's tight. $700 is a lot of money. So again, just to recap, give you a broad view of this. I have my transaxle out. That's just one nut in the middle right here. These 2 bolts are your alignment. This top bolt right here, I made a small mark, and you'll see that the top bolt has a bit of a cam built into it. See that? So again, before I took everything out, I marked, if the camera will focus, come on camera, dadgummit. Right there, that little yellow mark lines up with that yellow mark. When I put it all back together, it will be in alignment. Do that on both sides. It should be a fairly easy job. Now, if you don't have a press, again, I said you might use a vise. If you have a vise this large, you should be able to put that in there with something behind it and push it through. And then same, just reverse process to put it in there and clamp it back together to press it in. Hopefully this helps. I'd seen a few online forums and posts talking about how difficult it was and why they paid the price at the dealership. So I wanted to give a little bit of a small tutorial. It's really not that difficult.